Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Zoe in Beijing. More than a year has passed since China issued its ambitious football reform plan in 2015. So what changes have been made? What challenges still lie ahead? And what more can we expect for China's football reforms in the coming years? To talk about these and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Louis Liu, Vice President of IMG China, and Dong Jun, a sports commentator for CCTV-News. Let me start with you, Dong Jun. The passion of Chinese football lovers was lit up again in the Asian World Cup qualifiers because of the Chinese national team's performance. My question is, do you think it means that will be a turning point for China's national football team? How far can it go, and how far can Chinese football go?
Well, because of the importance of the competitions themselves, Chinese fans are turning, they are unprecedented, where the warmest, the biggest attention in many years, because China has gone this far. But don't make any mistake in that, because China have been struggling so hard to enter this last 12th round of competitions to qualify for the World Cup. And also, if you look at the rankings, China are the absolutely underdogs. And we have been so far winless after 2 matches. So don't be, too over-optimistic, and let's be realistic.
And it is coached by a Chinese rather than a
even the indigenous coach is in his temporary position before a new coach is found and placed in this position. China has sacked 2 foreign coaches, after they disappoint the local fans, and also with poor performances.
What is your estimate of China's national team's performance in the long term and the short term?
Well, short term wise, I would say I think I fully agree with Dong Jun. So it's don't over-expect the team to be qualified easily, okay? Because you certainly in the group you can see you got Iran and South Korea, definitely better, stronger sides, okay, at an international level. And I think personally, I believe we have to look at the next 5-10 years plan, okay, to improve our international playing standards, okay, talking about the national team.
Talking about long term, actually we have a plan. The country have a plan. That is the medium and long-term development plan for football by 2030. And the Chinese men's football team is expected to be one of China's top team, and women's team to be world-class team. This is a vision from the top political leadership. But can we deliver?
Well, as long as you put the infrastructure properly, okay, well, in many aspects, okay, to develop football, okay, and which includes the infrastructure, okay, playing grounds. Do we have enough playing grounds? Do we have sufficient coaches, qualified coaches, and do we have a proper structure to run the leagues, okay, professional leagues, okay, and do we have a more efficient and a more self-sustained, okay, governing bodies like China Football Association to deliver a bit more, okay, in accordance with the national sports reform plan. Okay, so it's about every aspect, all the stakeholders of the football map, to work together in a very cohesive way. Okay, and I think it's a big journey.
At least we have the political will to start it all over. It seems that the top leadership wants the government, the Chinese government, to put more investment into infrastructure, to buy more coaches, to ask our players to be trained overseas. Are we on the right track, and are you satisfied with the pace of it?
Well, actually, I think China has jumped to a pretty good start, because the world is knowing that it's no secret that China has such an ambition. It has been catching headlines around the world that China is spending a lot, and Chinese state leaders are visiting relatively strong soccer nations with publicity about their personal interest in developing football. And that's no secret, but at the same time, as Mr. Liu put it, it's such a systematic, huge project that will take decades to achieve. But this is already something significant, that a state government puts such a specific target on the agenda. You have the specific, specifics to judge the performance after different stages, And I would interpret that, other than those, you build the base of the pyramids and all those infrastructural and systematic works. But how do we interpret the target position of the Chinese men's and women's team after, say, 14 years? That would mean that a new generation of young boys, they must be very young kids now, or are even unborn. But in 2030, they have to be the strongest in Asia. They have to be at least one level up than the current team that we have.
I think a lot of people are asking this question: is China's approach, the top-down approach, will work in football? Because it seems that it's been working in some areas, infrastructure building, even in some enterprises, operations. But will this approach work for football? Don't you?
Well, it's such a fundamental debate. It happens almost everywhere. How much an influential role the government can actually play, not only in football, not only in sport, but in other sectors. But I think based on the past, the history that China has done over the last 3 to 4 decades, so far I think the Chinese government has been quite instrumental, quite effective in driving changes in lifestyle and in mindsets of the population, because it's such a learning process for China, for the entire population to embrace international trends. And I think the Chinese government and their leaders can do a very important and critical role in pushing this forward.
And Luis, have you seen and heard changes in terms of football training and performance of players on the ground?
Oh, absolutely. I think the top-down approach works in China in great extent.
Even in sports?
Even in sports, okay. And I think the Central Reform Plan has unblocked effectively a huge, massive investment from the public sector and also the private sectors, okay, which you can see the spending over the players, bringing the top coaches, top players into China. And the regional government, a lot of regional government has started to put some training programs, okay, educational, okay, authorities also start the process, kick off the process as well. So I think it's all about the stakeholders in China, for Chinese football. So how we cope with this top-down approach, okay, how we take advantage of that, okay. And the central government is very good at setting up the target, okay. By 2030, we need to be A, B, C, D, okay, achieve those goals. But it's about delivery plan. How to develop that delivery plan, okay? How can we consolidate all the resources externally, internally to deliver that plan? Okay, this is crucial, I think.
And what is the most important part if there is an action plan?
Yeah. Well, so every stakeholder, okay, so the Central State Council has formed, okay, a task force actually, which involves about 19 ministries, okay, education ministry,
headed by Vice Premier.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so and they're trying to put a program together, scheme together, and consolidating all the resources, okay, and all the even from the tax relief, okay, holidays, okay, so over the club operations, so, and I think I've seen lots of things are happening actually, okay.
You mentioned club operations. This is also in line with China's market reform of sports, particularly this case of football. How do you evaluate the process of marketization of football as a sport? Have we done the right thing, and are we satisfied with what we see now?
I think with a certain degree of optimism about China can do in the future, based on its past, we have to acknowledge that it's a huge challenge, something unprecedented, because so far in China's reform, China has been really good at, has been doing great in building things, building toys and machines and even ships. But this is by developing sport or culture. This is something so much related to demographics and to drive human activities and among themselves instead of building some materials.
But we have a very large demography of football lovers and enthusiasts.
That's the challenge, I think.
That should serve as a good foundation.
Because by manufacturing, stuff or goods, you actually gradually eliminate jobs. But this is about creating jobs. You have to make sure that by the end of the drama, you have even more jobs and more people enjoy playing this game.
And many business people see this as a great opportunity because of the fan base of China. Everything here in China has a big scale advantage.
Well, you've seen the big shift from lower-end manufacturing business, okay, model, right up to the creative, cultural, entertainment business sector, which is very much encouraged by the capital market, driven by the capital market, and also encouraged by the central government. Okay, sports industry, okay, football industry certainly is part of it. But I found out that the biggest challenge of developing this industry is about know-how, expertise. There's a huge, massive shortage of talented people, okay, in this industry. So that's my worry, okay, so that's IMG's
And I think that's why many business people here in China are already reaching out.
That's
China's
also an opportunity for
state-owned
IMG.
enterprises and private businesses who are actually the owner of the football clubs of China Super League and now reaching out to buy assets in Europe and probably in Latin America.
Yep.
What do you think of their overtures?
Well, so far it has been there are controversies about this,
Yeah.
and some European leagues are kind of scared a little bit.
Some say
when
Chinese can
competing
even buy a
against
whole
China.
European league with its money.
But there will be some changes that even the Europeans have yet to experience. This is something very unique in China, that you have various club teams that with players paid significantly different, and the sharp difference in their pay. How would you make sure that the team spirit will be even stronger or remain the same?
What do you think the Chinese investors are thinking when they're buying a football club in Europe? Are they buying the network, the market of the football? Are they buying, as Louis mentioned, the know-how and the management skills of running a professional club? What are the investors looking at?
I would interpret that their motivation as a collection of all. But I think if you look at the backdrop or the background of the Chinese economy, you have to acknowledge that they don't have many other targets to invest in back home here in China. So they have the sufficient cash or fund. They have to go somewhere, and it will have something to do with developing home football projects as well. And you have the basic fund base here back in China following those European clubs or league, and you can develop your marketing efforts based on that. Absolutely, but buying after acquiring such an asset, it doesn't mean you have to own it forever. You can sell it for a better price or sometimes.
So it's more for a business sense, or it's have a longer view?
You're right. It's a very good question. Okay, so I've been throwing this kind of questions out almost on a daily basis. But let me tell you, it's complicated. Okay, motivation behind it, and I think it's about the high fever of football sports assets in the capital market of China, Shanghai and Shenzhen. Okay, and most of the companies, if you look at it, there's a list of the company who's been spending huge money, okay, into European football, buying the assets back. Actually, they're using they're injecting those assets into the listed companies, okay, and to speculate the share price, okay. That's a very much capital market. Okay, driven acquisitions, I would say. Number two, you're right, okay. There are not many, as Mr. Dong mentioned, there are not many, okay, sustainable football assets in China, not at all. So they'd rather go buy something overseas and bring back those resources or know-how to develop their own business model in China. So I would say probably the two main reasons behind those acquisitions.
We'll talk more about that later on in our broadcast. You're now watching Dialogue. We're talking about how football reform has been faring out here in China.
We all play football, even if we aren't very good at it. And I think we're seeing that developing in China. People are using football as a way of spending time with their friends, developing their good health, just relaxing a bit. And so we are very pleased to be part of a big program here in China around developing football coaching skills for professional team coaches, for teachers in schools. And our target is to train 5,000 football coaches and to train 5 million young people in football to help develop grassroots football in China.
Enlarge the fan base and also the foundation for the footballers. Not only for the professionals and also for the amateurs. If we can encourage more and more children to play football on weekend and after school, so that means that we got a huge population in the future for selection for the professionals.
Root and branch reform of the Football Association. the removal of government influence, and its reconstitution as a representative stakeholder association.
And Louis, I know your company has won a bid in China's professional football league reform. What is your plan with regards to implementing the action plan?
Good question. So what we're trying to do is to develop or overhaul a governing structure over the professional football leagues, which has been overwhelmingly dominated by CFA, for the last 22 years.
What is the problem with the CFA right now?
I would say they're incompetent and incapable to deliver administrative jobs over the highly commercialized football leagues, and fast involving. The football is about every minute happening, and so they just can't cope with it.
Are you happy with the pace of the reform right now?
Yes.
What is the most difficult part of pushing forward?
You're right, which I appreciated the central government, which set up this deadline, which is great. In many countries, change like this will take forever. Politics, power struggle, negotiations, mediation. But in China, central government said that's it, that's the deadline.
So you have the mandate to push reform aggressively.
Yeah.
And difficult
part is to make the football club owners and the managers or directors understand how to govern properly, how to govern the football leagues by themselves. They don't understand it. They just, because football, professional football, is a very new business in China, and they have never been given a chance to manage themselves. I think that's the major challenge. Going back to that point, know-how, skill set. There's a huge shortage of know-how and knowledge about professional football.
Well, talking about that, I think the international experience is something we can learn from. Europe has developed their football club system for decades.
Japan.
They have very mature institutions that we can learn from. Do you think the Chinese acquisition of their clubs and also sending our players to play in their football clubs and super leagues and can help in any way for us to manage our own clubs better?
Those will be the essential steps you have to take. And from Europe to the UK, for example, this week I believe a delegation of Chinese, soccer developers or investors are in the UK for something like the soccer risk, that they can do a lot of, in-depth exchanges to decide what to do next. Absolutely, yes. But Europe has its own problem. Its development pace is slowing down. That's why they need funding from China as well. Some of the Serie A league clubs in Italy has been in this problem for a while. But at the same time, of course, I think the Chinese investors would have no intention to intervene into their daily operations. Instead, they try to learn something.
But they will keep a close watch on how they're delivering.
Absolutely. Yeah, at the same time, they watch and they learn and they exchange with those clubs or among the so-called cousin clubs between Europe and the Chinese clubs that they also own.
And last week I was in Spain. I visited the Madrid club because Wanda bought a team, Atletico Madrid is in Spain. And they also send kids from 11 years old, 18-year-olds to train inside the club to be embedded with the local players. Is that a good thing? And I ran into some problems because the kids were not so accustomed to the living style and the play of the teams there. And sometimes they were spoiled. They were not used to the strict routine of daily training. So it is a learning curve for them. It is also a learning curve for the investors and the club owners.
That would only mean it's worth it. If they find everything is fine, why bother travel to that country?
So you mean all these trouble is just something that we were to pay in order to get to a higher level?
Just as Mr. Liu put it, it's a cultural thing. You need to immerse yourself into the culture to achieve your long-term goal.
And talking out of the culture, many people here in China say we have a culture of watching football. but not have a culture of playing football. That's why we don't have good players in China. Do you agree?
I do agree. Okay, to great extent. Okay, the participation level of Chinese football is not as great as it is supposed to be, and definitely you need to encourage more kids to be part of the game. Okay, and to be participating in the game, playing the games. Okay, at the end of the day, we all understand a small portion of the talents will be pipelined through to the top league, top flight professional football clubs actually, okay, and the vast majority of them will be very much, very possibly to be the potential consumers of football industry. Either they can be fans, okay, they drink, eat, watch football, okay, and play amateur football even. So that's what we need to encourage. So that's why grassroots programs are so crucially important, okay, to the China football development.
But the problem is, many parents, when they are sending their children to play football in schools, they worry.
That's right.
Because the sports performance might compromise their academic performance. If they cannot make it to become a professional football player, why bother to let them play football and spend a lot of time on the pitch?
Well, that's why we need the central government to make some strategic decisions and help change and reshape the mindset of the parents and also the entire population. When you hit this, a snag or a stalemate in scoring high, scores in classes, and you definitely look for alternative, approaches. Something like, in the swimming pool, in sports, in other channels for your children to develop, because there are not many opportunities for all children to share. I mean, in science or in literature, you have to develop other ways for each kid to find their own position. And soccer would create such a great opportunity because football is a sport participated by, at a time, 24 players, 22 players at the same time, and with some substitutes, and with thousands of fans cheering up, and with hundreds of others, doing work related to this business. That's the most job-creating game in the world.
Apart from that, do you think the Chinese children share a passion for the sport of football?
Oh, yeah.
Do they love to play football?
Absolutely.
Besides all those imperatives for becoming a champion?
Absolutely. The kids love playing football. That's why football is #1 popular sport around the world.
Another question is why the sport of soccer, football? Among many sports, of course, China wants to have a strong team sport like basketball, volleyball, or football. But why football? Is it because personally, President Xi liked this sport a lot, or it because this is a sport that can really rally some team spirit, sportsmanship, and can foster children's skills?
Yeah, I can try to answer this question by following up on my previous answer. Football, by stressing the importance of football, China never said that it should be at the cost of other sports. China wants to be strong in almost every sport, from the Olympics to non-Olympic sports, because China has such a large population to consume and digest any sports before China creates its own sports.
We have our own sport, ping pong.
Well, that's an international sport that China happens to be good at. But China can contribute more creative sports because sports have been created, kept being created from time to time, and China can do that in the future. But for the time being, by adopting this football development strategy, it means that the Chinese government recognizes the completeness of football as a sport and also as a business, as an industry, very suitable for China to develop for this country with such a huge population, because again, it creates jobs.
And finally, your vision about football in the year 2030. What is the benchmark that you think, well, all the work we've done is worth it, pay off?
Well, I heard that China may be considering bidding for 2030 World Cup. If China succeeds that, and then the Chinese team doesn't have to qualify by overcoming the Asian obstacles, but they still have to come up with a very strong team that can convince the local fans.
So your criteria is the performance of our national players?
Well, you have, the club teams keep winning Asian titles and also perform very well when they compete against some of the world's best. But you can't expect them to be the world's best within such a short time. But absolutely, you want to see a much bigger population of actual players. Let's make it for sure that if we want to make, the investment to succeed or all the national policies not to fail, you have to make sure that the sport is really loved by the players themselves and enjoyed by the fans, instead of just a showcase by developers and for entertainment only.
And Luis, what would you like to see in 2030 of football?
A very sustainable, dynamic, vibrant, professional football league, become one of the major leagues in the world at the global stage. That will definitely produce a lot of good talents to support and sustain the international playing standard of the national teams. Number one.
And a lot of business.
Huge, massive business. And also, and I always believe to bring in the World Cup. It's so critical to Chinese society, to have that World Cup, taking place in China. So we encourage many, instrumental investment or passions or enthusiasm over the football industry. And also, to answer that question, why football is so impactful, because football is TV sports.
Yeah.
Just think about it. It's a lot of TV viewers.
Definitely.
And football is a participation sports. It's easy to play, and football is a live show sports. You can go to watch, to experience the game in the stadiums, and also football is a very bettable sport. So there is no second sport in the same line with football. Yeah.
Hopefully it will galvanize the whole nation of football players and watchers. Thank you very much, Dongjun. Thank you, Luis.
Thank you.
And you are watching Dialogue here on CCTV News. I'm Joe in Beijing. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.